Okay, so without further ado, I am Sarah. I work with Fair Share CSA Coalition based in Madison, Wisconsin. I support an apprenticeship program that supports farm managers on organic vegetable farms. I use she, her pronouns. I'm also a part-time doctoral candidate, so that's allowed me to have a lot of great conversations with farm owners and farm employees about their labor experiences in organic vegetable production. And I have also been a farm employee myself over the last decade. And I'm joined by Taylor. Taylor, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, my name is Taylor Foster. I use she, her pronouns, and I am with the nonprofit organization Rooted. I manage Troy Farm, which is a 3-acre urban vegetable farm on the north side of Madison, Wisconsin. And prior to working at this farm, I was at a 200-acre year-round organic vegetable farm in northern Vermont. So I have experience at very different scales be talking about today.
Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. And then just a quick note of thanks to CIAS, which is an institution on UW-Madison's campus. They provided some funding that made creating this program possible. And we're all joining from different places today. I'm coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin, which is located on unceded territory and the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk Nation. All right, so we're going to dig right in. So today we are going to be talking about communication, why it matters, how we communicate, how communication relates back to and feeds into leadership. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the art of delegation, everything that goes into delegating things. And if you were with us last week or you watched the recording, you know that we spent a good amount of time talking about leadership, including different emotional intelligence skills. So we talked about self-awareness and self-regulation, self-motivation, empathy, and social skill. We also talked about different leadership styles that you can use on the farm. So that's, we talked about affiliative leadership styles, which is really focused on building this team spirit and emotional bonds between employees and yourself. We talked about pace setting, which is keeping that steady or a faster pace and looking for, those short-term results. And we talked about coaching, which is really focused on exactly what it sounds like, building skills over time. So as we have our conversation today, I would just encourage everybody to keep that in mind, carry all of that forward, because I think there will be a lot of very obvious opportunities to see where some of that comes into play this week and in the coming weeks as well. Okay, so if you saw in my email to you, I made a comment that you would need a piece of paper, a piece of paper that you don't mind destroying. Okay, so you've got your piece of paper. The first thing you want to do is close your eyes. I'm going to keep mine open so I can read. And no questions and no peeking. Okay, so close your eyes, fold your piece of paper in half. All right, great. Now tear off the upper right-hand corner. All right, fold it in half again. Now tear off the upper left-hand corner. All right, fold it in half one more time. And now tear off the lower right-hand corner. All right, open your eyes and unfold your pieces of paper. Oh, very nice. And then hold them up to the screen. Okay, interesting. I'm going to take a screenshot. Awesome. All right, well, if everybody was listening to what I was saying, everybody's paper should look exactly like mine. Some of them do, but not everybody's does. So why is that? Why didn't you all follow the directions? No. So what do you think? What are some reasons why our papers look different? You could throw it in the chat or just shout out what you think.
This is all. Oh, go ahead.
Folded in half is not the most specific instruction, maybe.
Totally. Yep.
I was going to say the same thing. A lack of specificity.
Definitely. Yeah. Anything else?
I'll chime in here and say maybe the end goal wasn't clearly described.
Oh, absolutely. You guys are on it. Definitely. All of those things definitely come into play here. So there are a lot of questions that we might want to ask, some information that might be missing. So this is an activity that a farmer in, let's see, a Good Rain Farm, she's farming on the West Coast. She does this activity with her crew every year in order to start an intentional conversation about communication and the role that it plays on the farm. She wants people to be mindful also about the importance of communication flowing in more than one direction. Because we have different styles of communicating, we interpret things differently. Sometimes the end goal isn't clear and we just need more information. So she gave me permission to use this and I'll share it as part of the follow-up. So if folks want to carry this forward, we can definitely do that, or you can do that. So communication, we've got a really simple definition up here on the screen. The act of transferring information from one place, person, or group to another. And importantly, we don't just communicate using words. That is one way that we communicate verbally, but we also say a lot without words, with the nonverbal cues and signals that we give off that sometimes can speak louder than words.
So now that we have that baseline, shared understanding of what we mean when we say communication, why does communication matter on the farm? We touched on this a little bit during the paper exercise, but now I want to hear from you all a little bit more about why you think communication matters. So unmute, share out loud, share in the chat. Why does it matter? Safety, yeah, definitely. Efficiency, being on the same page, common goals. Yeah, in my own experience, are you talking about pieces or pounds? Are you talking about, which field are you talking about harvesting something from, varieties? What's obvious to one person is not always obvious to others. Yeah, safety, support, awesome. So you got that. So there's many different systems in place to facilitate communication on the farms, on our farms. Morning meetings, task boards, harvest sheets, maybe even employee check-ins and formal reviews. But here we're going to focus on interpersonal communication, so that person-to-person communication. Being an effective leader and being an effective communicator are pretty closely related. And like we've talked about with practicing and developing leadership skills, the same is also true for communication. Before we start to dig in, let's talk about the purpose of communication and what the goal is. So communication is about providing clarity, whether you're talking about one task or a major change that will be taking place at some point. It's about increasing understanding, so sharing important details with employees so they have a better understanding of what they're working towards, either on a specific task or in terms of how things tie into the bigger picture. Touching on some of those things you all identified: efficiency, being on the same page, goals. It's also about conflicts, big and small conflicts that can pop up when communication isn't there or when there has been miscommunication. So clear and strong communication skills can help minimize unhealthy conflict on the farm. Is there anything else that you would include here? Connection, building relationship, right, team cohesion. Yeah,
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, great. Okay, so talking about communication, what are the benefits? There are obviously a ton of benefits to having healthy, open, clear, effective communication in place on the farm. And we've got just a short list here. I'm sure we can think of many others, but for the purposes of this discussion, that open communication can really help employees feel engaged and committed. It strengthens that, and they're able to do their jobs better when they know what's going on and what is expected of them. And that can definitely come through effective communication. That can have a positive impact on employee motivation and productivity. That productivity can certainly relate to and benefit the farm's bottom line and their viability as a business. But that can also come through in the sense of accomplishment that people have from the work that they're able to do. We talked a bit last week about the pace-setting leadership style and how rewarding and fun that can be for folks, when they're able to just kind of move into that style, when they know what they're doing. And so that's really about not just having the skills to excel and succeed in that style, but having the information that they need. So that has a benefit, personal benefit and a benefit to the farm as well. That open communication can build trust. It can build trust between you and the employees that you're supporting, but between the team overall as well. And then having those open lines of communication, that can go a really long way in terms of helping you keep tabs on unhealthy conflict that might be popping up, or minimizing the conditions that allow unhealthy conflict to develop over time as well. With those open lines of communication, people may feel more comfortable coming to you, sharing things as they, notice them. Or if you're modeling these strong communication skills, you may also be instilling some of those skills and teaching those skills to employees that you work with, and empowering them to work through some unhealthy conflict when it's, smaller on their own without needing to involve you, which can be a big benefit. And we'll talk more about those systems and tips in 2 weeks when we talk about conflict. And then, another thing is that this all really just feeds into the farm's culture. And that can help create a work environment where people, feel valued, they appreciate that environment, and they consider, maybe this is a place that I want to stay over time.
Awesome. So how do you get there? We may be coming to this work with varying levels of comfort when it comes to the actual act of communicating. Some of us are more introverted, while others are more extroverted in their personality. Regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, we can practice our communication techniques and build those skills and our comfort over time. So we're going to look at some concrete tips for effective spoken communication, which tried to make easier to remember here by all starting with C's. So the 4 C's of effective spoken communication: be clear, be purposeful and intentional. Have you shared your expectations with your crew? Be concise. Practice being brief. Don't overwhelm with unrelated information, which is a personal struggle of mine. Be concrete. Be as specific as possible. Does someone know what you're looking for? And be courteous. So engage self-awareness and self-regulation skills and use a respectful and professional tone. And here we are really focusing on that verbal communication. So what you're saying, not necessarily how you're saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple of options, examples that we're going to look over. And as we go through each one, ask yourself which of the 4 C's are at play here or are not at play here. And then think about if you would rephrase this in any way if you were talking to a crew member. So the first one is you need to get that kale washed right now. What C's are in this example, or what C's are not here? So feel free to unmute or throw some responses in the chat.
I would say it's most of them except courteous.
Concise, yeah, clear, concise, concrete. Yeah.
Should go to
Yeah.
the next one, Taylor. Yeah.
Yep. So the next one we have, all right. We're sending summer squash to a new account and they've got some issues with their loading dock. I have to meet Trey by 1 to sort squash and then I need to head across town. Would you help Sam load up those 8 boxes sometime today? So is that clear, concise, concrete, courteous? Concrete and courteous, but not concise. I see. Not concise.
A lot of information there.
Yeah, a
read it
lot of
all.
stuff going on. Would you rephrase this in any way if you were the one giving this directive? Yeah, simplify what you're doing. And to me in this example, it's not, I'm sure there's a connection between all of these things, but it's not clear. It's not clear if you need help loading these boxes because you have all these other things to do by this time, or if getting to the loading dock is going to cause a delay, or yeah, just the last sentence would be fine, right? For sure. But it's also not clear, like what the timeline is on this. So yeah, a lot going on in this example. So the third one, we need to have 70 bunches of salad turnips ready by 2 o'clock. Would you take the lead on that and ask Javier to help you? Thanks. So is it clear? Is it concise, concrete, courteous? It's everything, Kelly says. All 4, yes. Yep. Yeah, so this is a good example of it's clear. What do you need? How many of them? When do you need it? Who's going to do it? Who's going to help you? It's, yeah, courteous. So which option do you most identify with, or how likely are you to communicate something to a crew member? And then think about, is that your ideal, or is there something about a style that rings true with any of the examples that you'd want to work on changing? And you can, again, unmute and chime in if there is anything, if you have any examples.
I think most of the time I am slightly more clear than in option 2, but I definitely struggle balancing being concise with being concrete, like giving enough information but not overwhelming.
That's a good point. I feel like you've got a lot of stuff flowing around in your brain. And the question is, what does that person need to know? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and Lexi and Zach say one of them can probably work on being more clear and concise with verbal communication. Luther says, I've been guilty of number 2, could be more concise. I think yeah, that one really does resonate with me. I had a mentor supervisor at the last farm I worked at who always gave me the full picture of things before, as the lead in to the ask, or to, like the really main point that she was trying to get through. But the way my brain worked, I really liked that because I liked the bigger picture and having all the context. We have a person who's been working at the farm now who does not want the background information, does not want anything extra, wants to know what to seed, in what size tray, what variety, how many seeds per cell, like doesn't want to know what the next step is, or what the step before this was, or why the printout is that way. And it's been a relearning exercise for my brain to be that clear and to just to understand that that's what she needs. So yeah, so it looks like you're all doing some internal reflection, which is awesome.
Great. All right, if we're ready to move on, we're going to move over to nonverbal communication. So we've been talking a lot about, what we say with words, how we communicate with words. And now we're going to talk about and think about everything that we say without words. So what does nonverbal communication include? What does it look like? It includes our body language. So this makes me think about during last week's session, a lot of people were talking about how valuable it is, how important it is to them that they spend time in the field with the crews that they support. Or as an employee, that's important as well, to have your manager out there in the field with you. But think about, what is your presence in the field like? So if your body language is saying, I don't want to be here, that can definitely counteract the positive, the benefits that you might otherwise get out of spending that time in the field with the crew. Maybe your back is to everybody the whole time. You're far ahead of them. You're not engaging with them. You're not conversing. That is definitely sending a message. So body language is a major factor when it comes to nonverbal communication. We can also think about our gestures. What is it that we're doing with our bodies? What motions are we making? So think about the difference between saying, like, you can't really see me, but like, all right, we can do this with your arms crossed, versus, all right, we can do this with, some encouraging clapping. So the movements that we make with our bodies speak volumes as well. Or maybe somebody comes up to you and they share, they've made a mistake. And your response is to put your head down into your hand. You don't use any words, but that gesture, that simple gesture, can say so many things. And maybe, like, you're just stressed out. That person may think, I really disappointed them. They're upset with me. So be thinking about your gestures. And your tone of voice too, that comes into play. How your words come out, that has a big impact as well. So, the difference between me saying, all right, we can do this, in a very monotone voice, versus, all right, we can do this. That first one, not very believable. It doesn't seem like you think we can do this, or you're not very enthused about it. And that also sends a message to people like, if you're not feeling very motivated and enthusiastic, maybe that doesn't transfer to me. And then I feel less motivated to do that work. Yeah, that can have an impact on morale for sure. And then sounds. So think about the sounds that you make. Maybe when that employee shares with you that they made that mistake, you exhale deeply, or I don't know, what's a disappointed sound like? That definitely can come into play here as well. Or if somebody is making, they're sharing a suggestion or an idea with you, and you make a scoffing sound, like a sound of dismissal, that can have a really big impact. And it can do more just beyond that moment. It can close down those lines of communication. It might have taken somebody a lot of courage and thinking and time to work up to sharing that with you. And that scoff, that sound in that very singular moment, could really undo a lot of that work and make people less likely to share things with you in the future. And then facial expressions, that's an obvious one too. Think of everything that you can communicate with a smile or a frown, some side eye, or, raising your eyebrows. Or if you have no expression on your face, if you're expressionless, that is really impactful as well. And people can interpret that in any number of different ways. You might be coming off as being aloof, bored, disinterested, disengaged, indifferent, all of those things. So facial expression is a big one. And it says a lot about how you're feeling and what you think. All right, what else? Do folks have other ideas of how they communicate non-verbally that we didn't talk about yet? And Taylor, if you see stuff in the chat, just let me know.
This one might be like kind of specific, but I had a boss once who was like usually quite stressed out. And the way that she would approach a field in like our like golf cart, essentially, our gator, or like in a vehicle, like really fast, that just expresses so much anxiety and just like stress before she's even like got out of the vehicle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like energy. What kind of energy do people bring to the situation? That's a really good point.
Kelly says vibe is a real thing. When you aren't feeling motivated, it is hard for your team to feel motivated. So yeah, that energy. And then Casey says the music I'm listening to can say a lot. And that definitely actually, that
Good
resonates.
point. Good point.
And who's controlling the music in the wash packer
That's a
facility?
Valid. One other thing I thought of is your volume of your voice. So tone is one thing, but volume is another thing. So are you speaking calmly and quietly, or are you yelling? Because yelling, that sends definitely, that shares some serious information with folks. Oh, Kim has raised her hand, or their hand. Hey, Kim.
Hey, so I was just thinking, we have someone at work, and the way that they, I guess it could be body language, it also could be gestures, but there's sometimes when they're really aggravated and they just like walk away, they turn their back from you and walk away as they're saying the response to whatever it is. So it's almost like their body language of turning their back to you on purpose, but then also walking away as they're explaining. And then interrupting also. So it's kind of interesting.
That's a good point. I think that's a great example of how our nonverbal communications can collide and say a lot of things together. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kim. Anything else? All right. So we have talked about what nonverbal communication can look like, and now we are going to talk about what can, how can you use nonverbal communication to the benefit of the farm, to the benefit of the people that you're working with, to work towards creating a really positive and rewarding and healthy workplace environment, because the benefits can be very far-reaching. So nonverbal communication, you can use this to support your message. If you're trying to bring morale up, you're trying to motivate folks to get through a tough day or a tough week, be thinking about your tone of voice and your gestures. What does your face look like? All of those things. I think, Kim's illustration of how we can use all of these things together to support our message, hopefully in a really positive way. So all of those things can really help you kind of connect with your crew in a meaningful and supportive way. So you can use nonverbal communication to help you communicate your message beyond just the words that you're using. So, if somebody's sharing that idea with you, we talked about, maybe you scoff, and that's not the best thing. But maybe you're nodding your head, and that is showing encouragement. That's showing that you're receptive and you're open to them sharing that information with you. So that's beneficial in the moment, but then, it also sends that message that, yeah, I'd love to have more of this. So please feel free to continue coming to me and sharing this great information with me. On the other hand, if somebody is trying to share something with you and you appear distracted, you're like looking around, maybe you're looking at a harvest log, not paying attention, not engaged, that also sends a message, maybe not what you want it to. Nonverbal communication can help you convey your feelings. So think about a time when somebody did make a fairly serious mistake on the farm. When you found out about that, what did your body language look like? What did you do with your body? What did your face look like? Maybe there were several different faces that you made. Did you make any sounds? What was your volume of your voice or your tone of your voice? So, in that moment, were you feeling upset? Probably. Could you do anything about that situation to correct it in the moment? Maybe not. So this is a great example of how you can really use nonverbal communication to help you take something from what could potentially be a bad, not so great experience, and use it to create an opportunity for learning and for correction. So just taking that beat, checking your emotions, and then moving forward in a way that makes that space for that conversation and learning can be a great thing. All right, and then nonverbal communication can offer support as well. So, that can be as simple as like a thumbs up, clapping, that encouraging clapping we're talking about. If people are comfortable with it, a pat on the back, something like that. Jason last week, as an example, shared that an employee had shared with him that they were marking the passing of somebody that was very dear to them, the anniversary of their passing. And that person said, this week is probably going to be a tough week for me on the farm. And I imagine in the moment, Jason was very present. He was showing his support, offering his support, conveying his feelings. And I would imagine that person who was sharing that had a pretty positive experience. If Jason had been disengaged, not making eye contact, looking distracted, that probably would have been quite a different experience for that employee in the moment. And then I think also importantly, memories like that, experiences like that don't just live in that moment. People take them with them and they remember stuff like that. And that can have a really big impact on trust and respect and motivation for sure. Okay, and then finally, we can use nonverbal communication and those cues and signals that we're sending off to de-escalate tension. So, using a calm voice, using an even tone, taking deep breaths, even if inside you are feeling very stressed out, you can work to kind of model that behavior. And in doing so, hopefully bring everybody else down closer towards neutral when emotions are running really high. Okay. What else? Does anybody have any other thoughts or examples of how you use nonverbal communication?
In the chat, Casey said, I get silly when it rains to lighten the mood.
Nice.
And then Tian said, I've always been told you set the tone. Whatever you do is what you get back. Sometimes when people are in a bad mood, they just need to let it out, listen, and move on by starting to give them good compliments to counteract the negative tone, and then their mood changes.
That's great. Yeah. You can play an active role. That's a great thing to take forward. Anything else?
One more from the chat. Evaluating the nonverbal communication of members of my team can help me navigate assigning tasks.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's interesting. So somebody who appears to really like something versus not so much, I'm guessing. All right.
So when have you seen nonverbal communication go wrong on the farm? And we want to hear from you. Give some examples and unmute put them in the chat if you'd like. I will admit my own failure with nonverbal communication was when we had a worker harvest something from the wrong field and I rolled my eyes at her. And I didn't even realize I did that, but she saw it and it bothered her enough to bring it up later during one of her check-ins. And I didn't address it. I probably should have. She didn't tell me, but it came back to me. So, in those instances, or, when you have a nonverbal communication that goes wrong, what did you do as a follow-up, or what do you wish you'd done? And in that case, I do wish that I would have followed up with her just to apologize and, let her know that no matter how frustrated I was, I should not have, my response was not appropriate. And it really ultimately wasn't a big deal, but yeah. Anyone else have any mea culpas? Casey said, my face is very expressive. I can't hide a bad day ever. It forces me to use my verbal communication to say, sorry, didn't get much sleep. And then Kelly said an entire area of the farm for a while struggled because the leader of that area at the time was very negative and frustrated in nonverbal and sometimes verbal communication. Right. Not feeling motivated or excited, carried on to the crew. Supervisor giving a blank stare or an eye roll and not saying anything when team members bring up new ideas. Right. That really discourages people from bringing up new ideas after that. Yeah. So how about examples of when you've seen nonverbal communication be done well or gone right?
I guess this isn't an example of that, maybe more of a question. I feel like a lot of people that I've worked with on farms are like not neurotypical in some way or another. And like just seeing a lot of the nonverbal communication, like I feel like that's really hard for some of us. Like I'm really not always in control of the tone of my voice. Yeah, and I guess just like, has anyone else noticed that? And what, besides being like kind of self-aware about it and maybe acknowledging it sometimes, what else can you do if you can't control your face or you can't control your voice?
Yeah. That's a really great question. I'll leave it open for a minute in case people want to chime in.
Something I had to do with someone I worked with on the farm was she had that where she like was completely unaware of the tone of her voice, and like she asked us to tell her when she was, and that was really helpful because I would it would get really uncomfortable. I'd be like, man, what is going on? Like, she's got this tone, what is going on? And I would think about it all day, but like kind of never bring it up. And I did one time and she was like, oh my God, just tell me that. Like, I used to rely on my siblings to like, tell me when you're being like super grumpy because I can't see it myself. And so it was nice to bring that to the light because that was part of her like process, was she needed that reflection of her nonverbal communication.
It looks like there's some support, Kaylee, for what you're saying. That seems to be a trend with farmers.
Yeah, and I think, what I immediately thought was that we have verbal communication tools that we can use and nonverbal communication tools. So that was a great example of just asking people to let you know, or you letting people know if you feel comfortable, like, know this about me, and just being, if you feel comfortable with that, direct and honest. I just putting it out there on the table and sharing information, I think, is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, and Kelly in the chat says verbal communication can bridge issues with nonverbal communication
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah, acknowledging it. Some other things that are coming up are get good at apologizing, nod, show that you're listening. Those are some good examples of when nonverbal communication's gone right. Rough days are easier when leaders lean in, show that they are here with the team through their actions,
Mhm.
acknowledge that the vibes are off that day. Yeah, for sure. And then switch the task or the pace of the day to make things feel more positive and productive.
Those are some great examples of engaging with your empathy skills. The vibe is a little off today. We're all feeling it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Ready to move on, Taylor?
Sure.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, but this is great stuff coming through the chat. Really
Yeah.
do.
Mhm.
Sorry. Whew, yeah, still reading the reading the
Nice.
text.
Good.
So we have spent some time talking about verbal and nonverbal communication and the role that each can play on the farm. We also want to take a step back and consider some broader things that you can keep in mind as you continue to build your skills as an effective and compassionate communicator, and things that have broader impacts on the crew and the workplace culture. So authenticity, and we're seeing this come through the chat a little bit too, but be yourself. We all have our own unique styles as a leader, and the same goes for how we communicate. So we need to be able to use our own voice and be honest and sincere. That goes a long way in terms of building rapport, and it likely will make people feel more comfortable communicating with you. And I think that kind of goes both ways in authenticity of being your weird self, and maybe that means you have some certain tics that people will get used to dealing with, and it also might mean being the kind of leader who overshares, or who really does, I don't know, who is really able to think on their feet and sense the energy of the crew and change really quickly when something's coming up. Listening, so practice being an active listener, focus on what people are telling you. This is coming through the chat too. Pause the other thoughts that you have running through your head, summarize what you think someone has told you in a follow-up, and follow up to what they're saying. And we'll follow this up too with a handout for more info later.
Mhm.
Empathy, which is one that's come up this week and last week as well. Empathy is a crucial skill for strong and compassionate leaders to develop. So as you practice acknowledging and responding to employees' feelings and experiences, they'll feel more seen, more heard, more valued.
Mhm.
Invite input. So it's good practice to provide space for people to share. And maybe after you've said something or just in general, but we'll dig into this next week in the session on delivering and receiving feedback. And then contributing. This goes back to rapport building. Spend time working alongside others. It's an important form of communication. And again, another thing that came up last week, it's telling others you're here for them, you're willing to do the hard work right next to them. It's raining or it's like hot and it's July and it's the afternoon and it feels like the beans are never going to end. Getting in there and like working with the crew as a leader is a really great form of nonverbal communication. And then, dig deep into your best self that you can be and get that crew motivated to keep going.
All right.
Embracing the suck together, Casey says.
Nice.
Yes.
That's great. Not so fun, very important. All right, so we have a little scenario here. I'll read it out. So you support a small crew. Typically, everyone gets along really well, but lately you've noticed a few things about one specific crew member. They seem to be moving at a much slower pace than everyone else, and it looks like they're just not trying very hard. Yesterday, you overheard 2 crew members talking about how they're frustrated with the situation and how it doesn't feel fair that they have to pick up the slack. After all, they're tired too, but they're still working hard and hustling every day. So, what would you do in this situation? Who would you communicate with, if you would communicate with anybody? And what would your communication look like? So we are going to go into breakout rooms for this little discussion. And then I'll put the text in the chat so that everybody will have that to reference. And then, yeah, just feel free to talk through that. If you have a similar experience you can bring to the table, by all means, and we'll take about 5 minutes or so. Then we'll come back together, and if folks want to share what was discussed in their group, we'll go for that. All right, here we go. Does anybody have anything that was really interesting that their group talked about that they want to share? Feel free to use the chat or just
I
shout it.
think we talked about sort of both aspects of it, but the one which is making space for a conversation with the person who seems to be having the bad day, rather than rather than starting with the 2 people who are talking about this person, and my contribution to that discussion was that it can't be in passing. Like like it's too easy. Like for me, when I'm having a bad day and I can't keep it off my face, or I can't, and it's too easy for me to go, if somebody goes, "Hey, is everything okay?" for me to just go, "Yeah, fine," but and just keep working. Versus if somebody comes up to me, like a leader, like the manager, comes up to me and says, "Hey, can we chat at lunch? How about that?" And then you're creating a set aside time, which is, shows engagement, it shows empathy, it shows, I'm curious what's going on. We're here to lift each other up and support each other, and just want you to know that. So if there's anything you want to share, and then I don't know if my breakout room members are here, but then the opposite, which is, I think I am curious to hear what other people have to say about it, but addressing the 2 people that are talking about behind each other's back, because that's also not not appropriate behavior.
Yeah, that can spiral real quickly.
I think
Yeah.
we also tied into that, like making sure that your conversation is direct and to the individuals, and that like one of the worst things you could do would be to go to like a team huddle or a morning meeting and just kind of make these broad statements, just because like you're likely to just cause everybody to have some anxiety over it, whether or not they're involved in it at all.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about this in the next 2 weeks too, but just kind of being mindful of what is the appropriate space and way to have those conversations. And sometimes it's in private. Yeah. Yeah, other thoughts?
Something that I mentioned was that the farm that I work at, we schedule anywhere from like 2 to 4 check-ins throughout the season with every single member of our crew. We have like crew of like 15 to 20. And we have a sheet that we give to people before the check-in that's like kind of a set of like questions and things to talk about, kind of prompts, so that they're prepared before the check-in to talk about it. And one of the things that we have on there is like, are there any communication, like interpersonal conflicts coming up with management? And are there any like issues or anything you want to talk about coming up with any other people on the crew? And of course, that might be hard for some people to talk about, but at least like trying to intentionally make that space is one way that we can kind of see like what interpersonal conflicts might be coming up in the crew.
Yeah, for sure. Making the space for it, definitely important. Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts? Thanks to everybody who shared. It sounds like there were some great conversations in those breakout rooms. All right. In that case, yay, here we are. We heard that people liked the polls last week, so we're going to do some more. Starting with this very first one. All right.
All right, so question 1. In your experience, which of these factors has the biggest impact on communication? Disengagement, stress, or lack of clear leadership? So just click the button that for the one that resonates most to you and hit submit if you haven't done this before.
Yes, thanks, Taylor. A little bit of coaching there. All right, we got some people who immediately knew. All right, so ta-da, stress. Stress is the winner. 57%. Some folks think lack of clear leadership, disengagement for sure. Yeah. We didn't talk about what our answers would be, Taylor.
Yeah, mine was stress.
Okay,
as
mine
well.
was too. All right, moving on to this next question.
So what is your stress level on a typical day on the farm? High, medium, low? And there's no, right or wrong
Just be
answer, and
honest.
everybody defines their stress as differently. So
That's true. Good
a
point.
typical day for you.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Medium. That's
Medium.
great. It's good that not everybody's living in that very high stress area. Certainly can relate to that. Sure, maybe it depends on the time of the season, what's going on that day. Yeah.
Yeah, Thursdays at Troy are the most stressful. It feels like for me, because that's our big pack,
Okay.
big harvest impact day.
Yeah.
All right, and one more.
Right here.
Do you feel like you have the tools you need to effectively manage that stress at work? Yes, kind of, or not really?
Okay. Seems like folks feel like they've got some tools. Yes, and kind of, about 85%. That's pretty good. Not really. Well, we're going to talk about some tools that you can use to help you work through stress next. So, yeah.
And like Casey says, I have the tools, but do I use them? That's a great
Well, that's
question.
enough. All right. Well, if you haven't guessed yet, this is kind of our transition into communication and stress. So a lot of things happen in our brains when we are experiencing stress. And given the nature of farm work, all of the many things we've already talked about this week and last week coming out in the chat, they're probably, you're probably experiencing stress fairly often. So when we experience stress, our ability to problem solve and think creatively decreases. Our ability to organize our thoughts and our feelings into a clear message decreases. And our ability to just communicate things to others in general also decreases. So when we are feeling this emotion, we're feeling this stress, one of our natural reactions might be inaction. We just turn into ourselves, stop communicating, and we just kind of move into that survival mode. Maybe we're overstimulated, we're overwhelmed, we just can't deal with this right now. That can be a pretty natural reaction. Other times we might lash out. We might act out of instinct. And often when we act out of instinct, we are taking our stress and frustration out on others and we regret it. And that can, of course, have negative consequences. Even if our intention wasn't to cause harm, is our impact that really matters and that people will remember. So Jason mentioned last week in our discussion, I can't remember in what specific context, but he said, it is so easy to destroy trust and it can happen so quickly. So this is one of those spaces and examples where trust can just kind of go out the window. But we also have an opportunity to really respond to stress in a thoughtful and an intentional way. Definitely easier said than done. But as a leader, communicating during these times of high stress couldn't be more important. You can think of it as your opportunity to show the people that you're working with, the people that you're leading, that their trust in you is not misplaced, that it's valid. And that certainly doesn't mean that you are perfect, that you have all of the right answers, that you're going to know exactly what to do in every specific situation that comes up. We've talked about this a lot. This is a process we're all going to be learning and trying to do better and be better. We'll certainly make mistakes along the way, but we can be kind of moving towards our ideal, like what we would like to work towards. So this is where those check steps can come in. You can be acknowledging that stress, that emotion that you're feeling, and kind of taking that moment to pause and looking at it as an opportunity to think, all right, this is how I'm feeling. How do I want to put that into motion, knowing that it will have an impact on others more often than not? So a call to react to emotion as thoughtfully as we can. And I'll just, a closing thought for this slide is that communicating when you're uncertain or when you're stressed or when you just want to focus on your own immediate next steps, it's not easy, but it's crucial. And that can be as simple as recognizing that uncertainty and putting words to it and just making that effort to say, hey, I need a minute. Like, I need to think about this, because doing that, actually communicating that uncertainty to your crew is better than not saying anything and leaving people to wonder, what's going on. So you're kind of taking control of the situation in that instance, and you're giving yourself some time that you might need to figure out what your next steps are.
So do any of you have tips that you want to share with the group for how you keep communicating through stressful situations? So feel free to unmute or use the chat. This can be a broad tip or a practice, or you could also share a specific example of how you're able to continue communicating during a stressful situation. Smile, fake it till you make it. Yeah.
Nonverbal communication.
I think asking for help is a really big one. I feel like when I'm stressed, I tend to just go into survival mode and try to figure out how to solve the problem by myself. And the times that I ask for help and admit that I'm feeling stressed, it gives my coworkers the opportunity to help me solve the problem and make me feel supported.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah. Admit to the stress, Kelly says.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Alex also says, I usually acknowledge my stress and then assure my crew that I'm actively working to resolve it. So then they know where I'm at.
That's great, because we're all humans. We all have these emotions. So then there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Casey asked to be pulled back into conversation if she falls silent.
Mm-hmm.
Try to understand where stress is coming from and then share the need that I have. Having structures in place is helpful. So having structured ways of communicating, if that makes sense. I think it makes sense. Yeah.
Sure.
No one else goes into the cooler for 60 seconds and kind of does a screen and then comes back and
it can feel good too if it's a hot day.
refreshes.
Cooling down your emotions and your body temperature. All right.
Marissa says, I've told my team that what my stress looks like is that I get really short with folks and curt. So if that's happening, that's a sign that I'm stressed. Don't take it personally.
Mhm.
communicate the goal and get input on how to get there, says Carly.
Nice.
Crying in the cooler is great, not healthy, but it can cool you off in more ways than one. Yes.
All right.
Here's a few other tips that you can consider when you're communicating during times of stress. Pause, take a few slow, deep breaths. Name what is causing you stress. Pay attention to your nonverbal communication. So, is it going silent, or, is it doing the walking away from the situation? Identify a few concrete steps you can take, write them down. Just getting it out in another way might help you be able to prioritize things, or I think any way that we can just release that stress without having to talk it through with another person is helpful. Think about your words. Think about your words before you say them. Make a plan and act. There's a couple more things coming through the chat. Not sure if everyone's seeing them, but coming back together as a team during lunch has been helpful. Emma said, have everyone on the cruise say what their stress responses are. That might be a good team building activity, and then you can know to see it, recognize it in others, and address it.
That's a good point. Yeah, we didn't talk about this today, but there are specific communication styles. And so how you cope with stress definitely could be useful to discuss as a group. Awesome. Okay. So one thing that effective communication can also help you with is delegation. So delegation is the transfer of responsibility of a specific task from one person to another person. And if you remember, so last week we were talking about the coaching leadership style. There's a ton of delegation going on, or ideally there will be delegation going on if you're working through that coaching style with other folks. You're building up their skills. You are transferring responsibility over to them. Okay.
All right, so consider this scenario, and then, be ready to share some responses. So you're a second-year crew member on a farm with 15 hired employees. 2 weeks ago, the farm manager pulled you aside and asked you to take over employee scheduling for the season, starting this week. You were surprised by this, but also flattered that the manager thought of you for this responsibility. You haven't done this type of work before, and you're not familiar with everything that goes into making things run smoothly. You're also not sure when you're supposed to fit this into your work schedule. The farm manager mentioned that she'd set up a time to explain everything so you'd be good to go for the rest of the season, but that hasn't happened yet. So what's working well in this situation and what isn't? If you were delegating this task, what would you do?
I feel like if I was delegating it, I would try to make or go through like a tutorial, or like at least try to write up a little instructions to share very briefly, so that the person has some reference. But I guess what's working well is that that's a big responsibility to delegate. So that's a good sign to be asking someone else to help with that.
I think that these kinds of comments are often ideas and not plans. And so a lot of times I'll follow up to say, hey, I know you mentioned this idea, but we haven't taken any steps towards it. What can we do to set up a plan?
Yeah, concrete steps. How do we get there? How do I put this into action?
So Luther says, I'd accompany the request with some immediate training so they feel equipped. And Alex says, what's working well? The manager is asking for help. Not working well is that there's not enough information or time to learn it. So Alex would make a schedule side by side with the new scheduler to make sure they know what they're doing, then have them show their first schedule, show them the first schedule, and then they can go over it together.
That's great. Yeah, it kind of seems like in this situation that managers just kind of offloading something without the extra follow-up that that employee needs to really succeed with this new responsibility. Okay, so why do we care about delegation? You know, sometimes it can just be a lot easier if we just do stuff ourselves. It takes less time. Maybe we don't have to communicate as much. We don't necessarily have to worry about mistakes that may be made. But there are obviously some really clear benefits of delegating responsibility to employees, including, you know, you're building trust, you're communicating trust. You know, you've worked with this person to build up their skills and their ability to kind of get them to the place where they can take on this new task, this responsibility. And you're creating opportunities for that learning and for their ability to kind of grow in their position as well. And a lot of times people are craving that, they're looking for that. And if that's not something that they can find where they are, especially if they want to, you know, pursue a career in this industry, they may look elsewhere for employment. I know Jason last week mentioned that he tries to get everybody on the tractor the first week, which, you know, that's can be kind of a scary thought. But just to show people, hey, I'm supervising you. This is a safe situation, but we can work towards this if this is something you want. So creating those opportunities that can increase motivation and engagement as well. You know, those employees probably feel more connected to the bigger picture of the farm, and they see the concrete contributions that they're making and the concrete impacts that they're having on the farm as well. And then that delegation, you know, through that delegation, you're building their confidence. You've been working to strengthen their skills, increase their autonomy, and that can translate to ownership and to accountability. You know, that has come up in a lot of conversations, like being fully responsible for something, then it's like your task. That accountability is huge. Okay, what else? What else comes to mind for people in terms of the benefits of delegating? I have a lot of ideas, but I'm curious to hear what you all think.
I like delegating things to people other than me because it often increases like observation about that area or that part of the farm, and it can really improve it. Like, you know, I observe that we keep moving bags over here. Like, is there a way we can store the bags over here or something? I'm like, whoa, I never thought of that. I've done that 100 times. Like, thanks.
That's great. Different perspective. And maybe you're increasing your own capacity to work on other stuff. Yeah, thanks, Olivia. Anna raised, let's see, Anna raised her hand. Sorry, Paul, and we'll go to you.
I think I can think of two things. I think one is that like nobody can do everything forever. And I think, you know, a manager's responsibilities are often going to continue growing. And so if they don't set something down for someone else to pick up, they'll like overwhelm themselves. And then also if something happens to you as a manager and you need to take time off work or you need to like quickly hand off some duties, like having already delegated some of those tasks to others and empowered people and trained people up to cover those tasks is great preparation for if like the worst case scenario happened, especially on a small operation. If you're depending on a small number of people to be able to step up, it can become really important to do that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think especially now, kind of going through the last 2 years of a pandemic too. That's a great example. Yeah. Paul, I think were you starting to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say this is somewhat self-centered, I guess, but when you successfully delegate to other people and they achieve the goal you set out for them through that delegation, then their success is your success.
Nice. Yep.
And so, generating good feeling for yourself about your own leadership is an important thing to maintain your energy as a leader. And so successful delegation can be really helpful in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And go ahead.
Oh, no, you go.
I would say, and that is, that same themes coming through the chat: reduces your own workload, increases staff engagement, reduces mental and physical loads off the manager. Shifting tasks means maybe you as the manager owner can maybe go on vacation. Not having to deal with the stress of everything is their responsibility, and by giving people the tools to help and communicate that you trust and believe in them is a big plus.
Yeah, I think another thing too, which kind of goes in the selfish category, there's a task you really don't like doing and somebody else would love to do it. That's an opportunity. It's kind of a win-win as well.
Yeah, and Brantley says, and this is resonating with other people, and I feel this rings true for me too, is I think it allows folks to empathize with you as a manager as well. They can learn just how much effort goes into a certain task. And so it kind of puts that empathy going in both directions.
Good point. Definitely.
But beware, as Tian says, that putting too much of a workload on the employees and having people have things being over delegated, just can shift the balance. So be aware of that.
I think that's a perfect transition to our next slide.
Yeah. So some tips for effective delegation. We do want to delegate in a way that is positive and creates a positive experience for people, but also, that it is effective and shows thoughtfulness, intention, and follow through. So know what to delegate. Make sure the task is an appropriate one to delegate and that you're ready and prepared to do so. It's like the scheduling example. Consider before you delegate, it's helpful to know that the thing is something the individual is actually interested in. So that makes a huge difference in what the process actually looks and feels like. And as far as strengths go, if someone is much more tuned into the bigger picture, they might not be an ideal candidate to take on a very detail-oriented task or project. So just make sure you're setting people up for success and what their interest and where their interest and strengths lie. So identify the desired outcome, talk about what the goal is, what success looks like. Is there a timeline involved? It's not simply about unloading extra work you don't want to do or have time to do, but there should be some intentionality that goes into this process. Provide support, make sure employee has support that they need to meet that goal. Deliver and invite feedback. So check in regularly, ask how it's going, offer feedback, invite feedback. This helps right away. If you are, you're delegating a big task to someone, you want to make sure that they're doing it right, kind of right away, rather than maybe getting into some bad habits or doing it wrong. And then, if you're not paying attention, a few weeks go by and then you realize, what's going on here. And it also helps, with that, keep that open line of communication between you both. So allow for failure, right? And for correction. Acknowledge it when it happens. Think about how you can provide your employee the opportunity to fix or correct those mistakes. That's part of the learning process as well. And it's hard, but when you're patient, it's important to have that feedback. I was just gonna make a point, use an example, and I just lost it. Yeah, but we can go to the next one, Sarah.
Okay.
So yeah, be patient. It can be difficult, but it's important to be patient. Practice your nonverbal communication skills, your emotional intelligence skills like self-regulation and empathy. And it really does help to transfer skills. And I think a lot of the times we maybe don't want to delegate tasks because it just feels like it's hard. It's like, I can just do it. I can do it and I can do it faster. And it's going to take a long time for that person to get up to speed. But, you know, really in the long run, you know, for all of those benefits that we just mentioned, it makes sense to delegate things and, you know, have other crew members, you know, be more responsible for things, be autonomous, be more a part of the process to understand, you know, more about the work that's happening. And then, you know, because eventually they probably will get it, recognize and celebrate their success. Okay, so what are your positive experiences with delegation on a farm, either when a task has been delegated to you or when you've delegated something to someone else, and what made it a positive experience?
I think in my experience, not having to feel rushed in the teaching experience, that was something at first that really stressed me out. This person has 1 hour to learn this one task, and they need to do it this certain way. But actually, perhaps maybe more counterintuitive route was to take it slow, continue to check in, and kind of assign that task to that same person over and over again, so it's still in their memory. And then I think giving a lot of praise too is really helpful, and finding authentic value in looking back and seeing, wow, that has taken so much of a burden off the team, that this one person has this skill now, they can now teach it to others. It expands. It's like this web of learning.
Yeah, that's great.
We have last year we had H2A workers come in, so they spoke Spanish and they did not speak English. They had been coming to the farm for many years, so they actually were some of the longest term employees for like actual experience. And I took the time to take kind of the one of them and in very I guess distilled form of communication, because neither of us shared a language, explain how to prune tomatoes. And it was so much fun because he like you're just kind of like gesturing and like trying to explain concepts like, you know, like dual leader systems and pruning suckers and things like that without actually using any of those terms. But then when we had some of the other H2A amigos come up to work in the greenhouse, that employee, like I couldn't understand a word he was saying, and I could see him communicating all of those concepts and following up with them and making sure that everybody was doing it the way that I had taken the time to show him how to do. And that was a very like kind of empowering, I guess, delegation thing to have happen.
That's a great point, that, you know, you can provide support and then that support can flow out and have a positive impact on others as well. Okay, I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to ask this last question and you can just think about it. It can be your takeaway, to think about your takeaway. So we've had some great conversation today, really awesome stuff coming through and through the chat as well. So just, you know, reflect, find a minute or two to reflect on what is your main takeaway from our conversation that we've had. And then that next step of how do you see yourself putting that into practice this next season? So just a couple things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can, if folks want, you know, to take another couple of minutes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put some stuff in the chat here, but feel free. I mean, we can hang out for sure. Our intention is always to have a little bit of extra time, and that just hasn't happened yet. And so apologies for that. But yeah, does anybody feel free or feel like they want to share their main takeaway?
And I really liked Mara's response to the delegation question, that delegating means others with more capacity might be able to breathe some life into a task. And that's, yeah, I think someone else mentioned the example of moving the sacks around, but that's so true. Just another person's perspective on something they might be really interested in it. I took on doing newsletters last year from the person who was doing them, who hated doing it. I said, I love doing that kind of stuff. Like, I'm happy to do that, and got to breathe, new life into that activity. But yeah, I see other things coming through the chat. I'm lucky to work where I do. There's great communication. And yet we can always get better. Managing nonverbal communication better, using it as a personal check-in when stressed. Yeah. Improving nonverbal communication, or controlling.
For sure. Awesome. Okay, well, I'll do a little wrap up here, and then people want to stick around. We can take advantage of being here in community with each other. But thanks so much for your time. I put the evaluation link in the chat. We've got some questions in there just about, what sort of additional support folks are looking for, what sort of community connection. So if you have a minute or two to check that out, that would be great. I'll follow up with the recording from tonight and then some additional resources like last week. And then next week, we're coming back together and we're going to be talking about delivering and receiving feedback. So definitely a lot of opportunities to pull tonight's discussion about communication forward. All right. So thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. Thanks so much for spending time with us.